For insight on China's ties with ASEAN and the South China Sea issue, we turn to Greg Poling. He's an Asia-Pacific expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies here in Washington, D.C. Welcome back to the show, Greg.
Thank you.
Greg, the U.S. and China are not ASEAN members, but talk to us about their importance in dealing and engaging with this group.
Well, ASEAN, it has its own, obviously, its forum here, but then, as you heard, you have the ASEAN Regional Forum, which is one of just a whole plethora of institutions that ASEAN has set up to try and drive integration across the Asia-Pacific more broadly with these 10 smaller Southeast Asian nations at the heart of it. Obviously, China and the U.S. are the rising and incumbent power in Asia-Pacific, so if ASEAN hopes to really see itself as the driving force behind that integration, China and the U.S. are the key puzzle pieces.
As we just saw in our report, the U.S. Secretary of State met with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi on the sidelines of what's taking place in Kuala Lumpur. Are they laying down more groundwork ahead of President Xi Jinping's visit to the U.S. next month?
That's certainly one of the things they're looking at, and we'll be seeing a whole bevy of diplomacy later in the year, not only with President Xi's visit here to Washington, but also with President Obama going out to Kuala Lumpur for the East Asia Summit, the U.S.-ASEAN summits in November, as well as the APEC summits. So they will have multiple leader-level visits. The South China Sea is going to be one huge bone of contention, cyber probably as well, but there's also going to be a lot of talk of cooperation. And I think what we saw in this meeting was precisely that, what was described as a good meeting, pretty blunt probably on the problems, but also recognizing areas of cooperation.
South China Sea dispute, a big topic, as you mentioned. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi offering some proposals, some initiatives to maintain peace in the region. Do you think we can see more productive discussions coming from those proposals, perhaps?
We can certainly hope to see more productive moves going forward. We just last week had the 9th senior officials meeting between China and the ASEAN states on their declaration of conduct, which is a non-binding agreement in the South China Sea, and talk about moving more forcefully toward a binding code of conduct, which is one of the points that Foreign Minister Wang Yi made. Secretary Kerry also made his own proposals for a freeze of escalatory activities that the ASEAN states seem to be moving towards supporting, especially the Philippines. It's worth noting that with Foreign Minister Wang Yi's proposals, there was an awful lot of skepticism from the ASEANs. From their perspective, especially on the code of conduct, they've been working toward this for over a decade. They haven't seen much progress. They're in a position of we'll believe it when we see it as far as this proposal for more robust cooperation from China.
What are some of the big issues that we should be looking toward as this meeting continues? What are some of the other major issues that they want to get accomplished?
Well, the ASEANs among themselves are not only going to be talking about the South China Sea, they're also talking about their own efforts toward integration. At the end of the year, they have the ASEAN community coming into effect, primarily the ASEAN Economic Community, which is supposed to be creating a single market and labor production base among these countries. It's not going to get there, but they're going to talk about how much progress have we really made. There will also still be probably a lot of fighting over what the language of the joint statement is. We saw this a few years ago where even mentioning the South China Sea broke up consensus. We'll have to find out over the next 12 hours or so if they can do better this time. And then tomorrow we'll have the ASEAN Regional Forum in which a whole bevy of issues from ISIS to North Korea to cybersecurity will be discussed, including the South China Sea. And we've seen in years past that often the Chinese delegation feels ganged up on. I mean, you have 26 countries in the EU. The vast majority of them are going to want to speak up in support of international law, maritime security, what have you.
All right, Greg Poling, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.